Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. On YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated. And while you're there, check out my son's show previewing the big college football games of the week, Between the Hashes. It's going to come out on Wednesday this week. We got the holiday week, of course, and you got big games the rest of the week. So it's not just on Saturday, but the biggest one, of course, is Ohio State, Michigan. And yes, that's how I'm going to say it this week. Anyway, check out Between the Hashes, again, coming out on Wednesday. Also, while you're there, check out All's Caps, ALZ Caps. That's with former Washington Capitals defenseman Carl Alsner and AP hockey writer Steve Wino talking about the Washington Capitals. In a minute, I'm going to play my conversation with former Washington tight end Logan Paulsen. Before I get there, we're going to talk about Chase Young, but I want to fill you in a little bit in case you hadn't heard what Ron Rivera said on Monday about Chase Young. They're still not sure if he's going to come back this week. The big question remains the confidence that he shows in his knee when he's planning and driving off that right knee and then engaging in blocks, engaging in contact with 300-pound defensive linemen. Rivera has said that the trainers, the strength and conditioning staff, have told him that there's nothing more they can do to get him ready. It's really all about right up here, the mental part of the game and his confidence in that. It takes time, folks. This is not an easy process. Remember, this is a longer recovery process because they had to do a graft on his left knee to get some patella tendons to put into his right knee. Made the process longer. So he hasn't done football work in a long time. Logan and I are going to get into that. So one more little quick nugget on Chase Young. Rivera said that when he does come back, if he plays this week, and chances are we'll probably know by Saturday morning because they really want to see how he does in practice. Well, they're going to practice in full on Wednesday and Friday. So they should know by the end of Friday, how is he looking? Is he showing that confidence? And there you go. So it's really about that. It's not about the health of the knee. It's about the confidence that he has in using it in a football manner to maximize that talent. And when he does come back, Rivera said initially he's going to play about 12 to 16 snaps. They'd like to build it up by the end of the year to 20 to 30 snaps a game. For those wondering, why even bring him back now? Because they're 6-5 and he's a good player. Why wouldn't you? He's ready to come back and play. The only way you're going to come back and get that confidence is by going out there and doing it. It's not about, is the knee going to be okay? The knee doctors and trainers and all that say it is. If it is, then it's really about the confidence. So he can go out and help them. Chase Young is a talented guy. You're adding a talented guy. Yes, maybe only in a situational role, but a guy that can help you. Maybe down the stretch, he makes some plays in the game that make the difference in a playoff berth or not. Don't know, but he's a talented guy. And if he's healthy and he's able to play 15, 20, 30 snaps a game, you bring him back because he's a good, talented player. So he could be a big help for him. Anyway, Logan and I get into all that. We talk about Taylor Heineke. We talk about the run game. We talk about John Allen, Deron Payne, all that stuff. So it's enough for me. Don't want to hear me anymore. Let's get to my conversation with former Washington tight end, Logan Paulsen. Well, Logan, it's been a few weeks since I've had you on, and things have changed here just a little bit.
Yeah.
So just taking the big picture view, what have you thought about why this team has turned this around?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. I think it's really coincided with the growth of some young players on the defensive side of the ball and, obviously the extremely high play of Allen and Payne. And then I think understanding, coaching, philosophical understanding of where this offense is and how it needs to support the defense. And I think that's been one of the biggest changes. And obviously that's been characterized by this team running the football a ton. But I also think it's understanding what Taylor does well, how Taylor has elevated the offense. I know in like the national media, he's not, not the national media darling necessarily, but I think he does things in terms of avoiding pressure, understanding timing, throwing with anticipation that elevates the offensive line, allows the offense to stay on schedule and alleviates some of the stress on the defense that they were experiencing through the first 4 or 5 games of the season. So that's been really nice to see. And I think probably the biggest shift, and obviously, is this tenable long term? I think when you look around the league, this is becoming a more popular approach. So it leads me to believe yes, but the margin for error when you're playing games like this is very, very small. And I think we've seen that in some of the victories that they've had. It's very, very close to being a loss because your margin for error is so small.
But along with that, because you're right, the margin for error in this league is very small, but the coverage units have been good. The special teams has been good. Joey Sly, Tress Way, The
Yep.
turnover margin has been very good. The
Yep.
penalties have gone down. When you're doing those, and those were all the, not all of it, but some of that stuff was not working well in the first 6 games or so. So when you're doing that better, it gives you a better chance to win 5 out of 6.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the Dallas game, for example, earlier this season, and just they tried to adopt the same philosophy. They tried
Right.
to adopt this philosophy with Carson Wentz, especially after that rough Philadelphia game. They knew the pressure and the sacks and all that stuff was going to be an issue. So they came out and tried to run the football. And I think if you think back to those first couple of drives, there's a holding penalty, there's a false start, right? There's just not playing disciplined football, and they're
Grounded.
not getting away with the same type of stuff or those mistakes
Right.
in those high leverage situations are a big deal. And you mentioned the special teams, which I think is great. The punt team's been awesome. I think Percy Butler and Christian Holmes in conjunction with Reeves have just been outstanding in terms of downing the football inside the 20-yard line and just being excellent coverage groups. Because people think, the punt team, the whole coverage group's involved, but it really comes down to if you have two elite gunners, which they do, and those guys are playing at a high level. So props to that group, because they put the defense in a good spot, and really that's an extension of your defense. It's the first defensive play, and they've done an excellent job executing that.
I think let's go back to quarterback, because that's obviously the topic of the week. But sticking with what you were saying about Taylor, and there were a couple plays the other day where it looks like he gets the ball out just like that as he's getting hit, but it's because you hit that plant step and the ball's coming out. Is that some of what you're talking about, or what other things are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there was a play early on in the game, or I forget where exactly, maybe the second quarter, where, they're running like an A-gap pressure, and the offensive line has to kind of squeeze it down, which is the same play that, they got a sack on it against Chicago, right? They're bringing internal pressure from a 5-man structure, and the offensive line has to work to squeeze down. Trey Turner does a great job kind of bouncing it back, gets a piece of the rusher, but he's still pretty clean. And again, Taylor feels that pressure on the inside, takes kind of a false step back, gets the ball over the rusher's head to Logan Thomas for a 15-yard gain. It's hard for me to say with absolute certainty that would be a sack with Carson Wentz, but it probably is an incomplete pass or a sack, I would say, just based on the body movement and understanding where the ball needs to go. So again, then there's another play where they're running a deep out. Terry's running a deep out to the right side of the formation.
That's the one I'm looking at too. Yep.
Right, and I think the left tackle misses on the block. There's a fast pressure, and Taylor's letting that ball go before Terry's even out of his break. So understanding where the ball needs to go, understanding where the check down is, understanding kind of the subtle body movement in the pocket to get the ball out, I think is great. And I think, that's one of the things he brings, right? He understands where the football is supposed to go in the offense, but he also has chemistry with the players that we're talking about. He has chemistry with Terry. He seems to understand. He's starting to build that chemistry with Jahan. He has chemistry with Curtis, right? And so obviously chemistry with Logan Thomas, who had an excellent game in terms of throwing the ball where only he could get it. And so I think if he can play like that, play with like relatively low pressure situations, right? And what I mean by that is those are high pressure situations, but don't make him do that, 50 times a game. I think you can win football games. And Scott deserves a ton of credit for kind of shifting his approach. This was a team that we thought early on in the offseason was going to be characterized by the skill position players, specifically the receivers. But obviously the ability to run the football has really helped out, right? And it's not been the most dynamic run game in the history of the NFL, but they're able to kind of grind and claw and keep you in third and manageable and convert in third and short with the run game. And again, that has helped Taylor Heinicke, I think, exponentially.
And I want to get to the run game in a minute here, but let's stick with quarterback because obviously, Ron Rivera, how long Heinicke keeps a job, it really, if they lose, let's say they lose to Atlanta and he doesn't look good, well, Carson Wentz could be back out there for the Giants game. We don't know because Rivera's really not committing beyond right now.
Yeah.
But when you have one of the things John Allen said after the game is, Coach Saban always said that the locker room, basically the players decide the quarterback. Do you think that kind of happened here with what you've heard coming out of that locker room about him?
I mean, that's a great quote, by the way. I love that quote. I think to a certain extent, yes. I think the team, and it's hard to say, right? It's hard to say because
there's not a knock on Wentz. Like, I'm not by that. It's more so about Heinicke's popularity in there and just what the personality of him. It's not designed to be a knock on Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and the reason I say it's hard to say is because this team and the coach's understanding of the team is so drastically different. like they're understanding that, and quite frankly, the growth of the defense. The defense has grown. You get
Right.
Forrest playing good football. You get Bobby McCain at the NICU. You get the additions of a guy like John Ridgway. You get the addition of Jamin Davis, right, who's playing at a very, very high level, right? Allen and Payne. And then all of a sudden, the complexion of the team shifts. I think I remember early conversations this offseason was like, who is the defense? What are they going to be? Right. And I don't think anybody thought they were going to be this good. Right. And so now the paradigm shifts, right? They are good enough. They're playing good enough to win you football games,
Right.
win you tight games. So offensively, our focus needs to shift, right? Our focus needs to shift to running the football a little bit more, to kind of being more conservative, being okay punting. And I think that difference in approach obviously elevates Heineke, because it doesn't seem like it would, because it's suppressing the ceiling of the offense, but it's suppressing the ceiling of the offense to support the defense, right? So as much as we want to say the team is fighting for Heineke, they're playing harder for Heineke, and I think there is an element of that, right? I just think it's multifactorial. I think the philosophy's changed, the complexion of the team has changed, and I think it also coincides with this idea that Heineke is elevating in certain situations where Carson wasn't. So as much as we want to say it's the team fighting harder for Heineke, I think the coaches have changed, the roster's changed. You know, the take out William Jackson III, right, and insert Benjamin St-Juste, and that's a huge change, right? So as much as the team is picking Heineke, I think the change in this team coincides with a little bit of easier schedule and an identity shift that supports Taylor. And I know that maybe not the answer you're looking for,
No,
but I
no,
do
no.
think,
That makes a lot of sense. I
yeah,
think that, and I also think because when Carson was in there early on, the temptation was you got a big arm quarterback, you got Dotson, you got McLaurin, you got Samuel, you got Logan Thomas out there. Like, look at all these toys.
yeah,
The temptation is to use them a lot more. And I also think too, Logan, that early in the year when Wentz was playing, Brian Robinson wasn't as effective. The line was a lot of guys in and out. You know, Trey Turner wasn't. I think Trey Turner's been a lot better the
been better,
second time coming back in. So I think and Logan Thomas is getting back to what he was.
right,
You know, and so I think there's some things that are coinciding with this rise. And you got a guy operating the controls who knows your offense
right.
and who's keeping things on schedule.
Yeah, and so again, like all those things, it makes it hard to separate Heineke
Right.
as its own variable. But I do think guys like him. I think
Yeah,
they
oh,
like
yeah.
to play for him, and I think they enjoy being around him, and that's an important variable too, right?
Mhm.
And you know, the fact that he's at the helm when you win a big game like the one against Philadelphia, it breeds a certain amount of confidence in that group. And how significant was his impact on that game? I think a lot of people at the national level would say not very, but I think when you look at the third downs, like he's
Yep.
throwing for a lot of those, and he's
He
making those
is.
plays, he's anticipating the throws. So credit to him, kudos to him, right, for that. But also, I love that you mentioned Logan Thomas getting healthy. He kind of looked like himself for the first time
Yes, he
last week.
did.
B Rob's getting back. Trey Turner looks healthy, right? That O line's kind of finding some level of cohesion. So all those things are part of it. And he's just the guy at the helm. I do think it'll be really interesting to see this week against Atlanta, because I think Atlanta is going to be a really kind of good litmus test in a way that, you know, Philadelphia, in a way that Houston wasn't, in terms of
Why is
presenting
that?
their own. I think because they are a team that is going to try and punch you in the face. They know who they are, right? And I know this team has been very good at stopping the run, but no one we've
Oh, yeah.
played this year outside of Tennessee has majored in it to the same level as Atlanta.
Right.
They know they live and die by running the football. They have excellent backs. Cordell Patterson is an explosive play waiting to happen. Algiers is a physical, hard-nosed runner. The backup, the third string guy who gets a lot of touches, number 42, is like built like a fire hydrant, and they are going to make you earn it, right? They've got a big, physical, fast offensive line, and a fullback that blocks, tight ends that block, the receivers block, right? It's one of those games where, like, put your mouthpiece in, put another roll of tape on your wrists, because there's no, it's like a fight where you know what they're going to do, and it's like, can you stop it? And I think this team's capable of it, but it's a different type of test than Houston, different type of test of Philly, right? It's really going to say, you're the best run defense in the league. Let's see it, because we're going to do it regardless.
And I'll get to that in a minute too. Sticking with the Logan Thomas situation, because there were a couple of throws that Taylor made the other day that were absolute trust throws.
Yes.
And like
Yes.
that's when you know you're going. I will say there were a couple of times early in the game where I saw some guys, like Logan was one of them. One time was Jahan Dotson, I'm like, it's there. I know you know probably what I was talking
Yeah.
about, but he did get them late in the game. There were 2 or 3 trust throws.
Yeah.
Those are big now, because like he has that with Terry, has that with Logan. I mean, that's a big key for them.
I think 100%. And I think, as much as we want to talk about X's and O's, there is a interpersonal relationship with
And
some of that.
Logan and Taylor are like really, really tight.
Yeah. And I think you see that. I think, obviously the corner to Logan where he kind of throws it, into that cover 2 look and understanding the angle Logan's going to come out at. That's a big deal, right? The slant to Terry, understanding how Terry's going to run the route, the dig to Terry on the first completion. Terry kind of throttles in the hole a little bit, and Taylor puts the ball out before he even sees that. He knows that about Terry, right? The out, he knows the depth of it, right? Like Logan Thomas on the check down, understanding where he's going to be. All that stuff is significant. It's important. And that's something that, again, it's interesting because I think Jahan's production with Taylor has come down a little bit. I think he's still coming back from the injury, not quite 100%. But one of the things about Carson that I found fascinating was he had excellent chemistry with Jahan. So
Yes.
Jahan's production was excellent, but his chemistry with the rest of the playmakers on the offense was somewhat lacking, I thought, at times. And here you kind of see the reverse. You see a guy who's got great chemistry, great understanding of each individual person, and you see how that ability to be kind of the consummate point guard or at the quarterback position elevates those positions, even if it's a slight elevation, even if it's not like they're going for 1,000 yards every game or whatever. It's a slight tick, and how that affects the offense's production.
And I think, like, it's funny too, because with Logan, and there was one play, and this is, I don't know that I'm making more of it than it is, but I also think it's a familiarity with offense, patience, calm in the pocket.
Right.
The little crosser to Terry that got, like, it was a 9-yard gain.
Yeah.
But what I liked about that play is, first of all, the design, because Logan runs right at the linebacker.
Yes.
Linebacker's got to cheat a step or two inside, but Taylor's got to be patient and let Terry clear that. But because of all that, he gets that advantage, and that's 9 yards. If you throw it just a little bit early, it's a 4-yard gain. And
Right.
it's a big play. I mean, it's a 5 yards are a big deal in this league.
Yeah, it is. And again, I go back, like 5 yards in this offense is gigantic, right? Because it keeps you on schedule, right? It allows you to convert. And I think, like the margin for error we talked about is very small. They're a holding penalty away from punting. They're a drop pass away. But because of some of the stuff Taylor's been able to do, and I think, this identity that they've been able to establish with this duo run that they're talking about, we'll talk about that more in a minute, but getting that identity in the run game has been huge, and just kind of fleshing out conceptually who they want to be from an offensive standpoint, and getting a person back there who's, I'm going to give him the game manager, moniker. I don't mean that in a bad way, because it allows you to execute your offense, stay on the field, and elevate your defense and let your special teams play at a high level. So I think that is extremely important. And the timing elements are very cool. Like going back to the Philadelphia game, like one of my favorite throws of the season so far from him was when Curtis catches that in cut over the middle of the field, right? You get a clear by Logan Thomas. He's Curtis is number 2.
Yeah.
And so the linebacker is right in the middle of the field. He's got Curtis covered up, but understanding the concept, Taylor's got a guy in his face and throws it to the spot, understanding how the concept's supposed to defeat the coverage called, and that ends up being a big play. And those are the types of things that he brings that, again, will never really show up on a stat sheet, but they are elevating this group. And, like you said, he's one bad game away from not being the starter. But I think those are things that I look at and say, those are nice additions at the position.
Yeah, and obviously, like everybody, and I don't know why we always have to say it, but we always see the flaws. I think some people think, oh, you're praising him. He's not Joe Montana. We know that, but it's what he's doing for this offense. And by the way, the game manager, every quarterback in the NFL has to manage the game.
Right.
It's just what level can you do it at? That's it, right? Yeah. And so, but like looking at the run game, because you said it earlier, and I agree. Like what I'll tell people, it's not dynamic, but it's efficient and it's effective.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing that's because it's funny, because even the other day, like there were times I think John Bates is a terrific blocker. I thought he was inconsistent on Sunday at times.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like, but I think like Trey Turner's been solid. So when I think Cosme has been good against the run when he's in there, really good. And
really good.
So, I think there's some improvement there. But what are you seeing with it? Because again, to me, it looks like there's still a lot of room for improvement, but they're still being effective and efficient while getting there.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of it's just kind of understanding who they want to be, right? Early in the year, I felt like they were running a lot more RPO stuff and stuff that they weren't necessarily executing at a very high level. Like when you watch, I'm going to go back to Atlanta because I've watched a lot of Atlanta already. right? It's very crisp. Like everyone in the stadium knows what you're going to do, but also the offense knows what you're going to do, and they can execute at a high level versus multiple fronts, right? They
Right.
understand the calls, they understand the execution, and so they've really leaned into this duo run, right? And they get to it in a multitude of different ways, but it's the same run, right? Essentially, like it'd be run out of like a 2 tight end set to the right normally, and they would just kind of double team across, and it's a great run. But now they kind of cross sift, they motion to it, they use it kind of one guy as like a fullback almost, and it looks almost like a counter, but it's this dual run, which allows your offensive lineman to get into double teams and puts your tight ends in a good position to get successful. And because they run it out of kind of different pre-snap structures, it helps in terms of giving an advantage and not tipping your hand to the defense. And then the other thing with that post-snap movement, the flash blocks, the inserts, all that stuff that they can do off of it, it helps your play action game. So I don't want to say it's that one run by itself,
Right.
but that has really changed who they are. Like if you look at in the gotta have it situations for them running the football, they're running duo. They're running duo out of this like sift action with the fullback leaning up inside, and the backs are reading it at a high level. So again, the comfort level of the back is important, the comfort level of the offensive line, they're targeting it correctly, and they're executing it right. And now, how sustainable is that moving forward? We'll see, because teams are going to start keying on that a little bit more. But I do think that if I was going to point to one thing, it's that understanding of that specific run, and then how they're getting to it from multiple different personnel groupings and multiple different formations.
With Washington, because to me, the things I like about this run game is that, again, I think some of the dynamic stuff comes from Curtis Samuel running the
Right.
ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, like, one of my favorite plays was that jet touchdown. And
Yeah.
mainly because of, and I thought this was going to happen, where they're going to fool the eyes a lot. They got
Yeah.
so much motion and movement. And when you watch the play, the defensive end jumps up and Samuel's already by him, and the end had no idea. And then the linebackers are going with Gibson. And so
Yeah.
it creates that one-on-one situation on the outside where he just makes one move, and now it's a touchdown. But so they have a varied run game. But I also like how Antonio Gibson has been running. I liked how he
Yeah.
ran Sunday too. And, I think that's been another key. But, where do you feel like this run game can improve? Because again, when you watch, like, it's somebody's not always getting to the linebacker for whatever reason.
Yeah.
There's sometimes guys unaccounted for whatever reason. And sometimes it's missed block because the other guys get paid too, as we know. But
Yeah.
so what are you seeing, and where can they improve?
Well, I'm really glad you brought up the motion thing, because I thought that was a really nice wrinkle that Scott put in, because, on first, second down, we knew Houston was going to play a lot of man-to-man coverage, right? And so motions and pre-snap motions, post-snap movement makes it very, very challenging to play man coverage and fit runs effectively. So, there's a couple runs, and like where Scott was able to exploit that, right? And you mentioned Gibson. I think Gibson had an excellent day. I also think understanding like what Gibson does well has been nice, right? Kind of speaking to the back skill set. Speaking of B-Rob's skill set, speaking of Gibson's skill set, but not tipping it off, I think has been extremely advantageous. And you mentioned, the offensive line not always getting to combinations. And I think that's one of the things about running this duo run, for example, is when you do that, you let the back kind of say, make us right.
Right.
And so that's been something that I think is good, because you have two backs who are capable of elevating that group,
Right.
especially if they understand the reads and understand the structure of the defense. And I think they do right now. And so I think that's something. But yeah, when it comes to the run game, John, we've talked about this a lot. I'm an extremely fastidious person. And sometimes when I see it, I'm like, this is not targeted correctly.
Right.
The angle here does not support an effective down for the offense. So those are some things I'd like to see clean up. But I will say, I mentioned all the motion and the pre-snap motion, the post-snap motions to kind of get to this duo structure. That has been advantageous. So they are obviously thinking about that. They're self-scouting and they're improving in that area. It'll just be interesting to see like what the run game looks like when a team says, oh, well, we know they run duo out of this. Let's knock this in the teeth. So, but yeah, I think those are all kind of the factors that are elevating. But again, like the targets are still, they've gotten better, but that can always improve. And then obviously, how do you put your guys in the best position to get to your blocks, right? Because sometimes you just call a run and the defensive structure is not good. And so again, that would be the other thing I'd kind of keep my eye on.
Yeah, and you're right, guys. Like, when you watch a guy know how to press the hole, set up blocks, and I always go back to Alfred Morris, because I thought he was terrific with being able to press the hole and set up a block, and you get the guy to move. Now you're cutting back, but you give the guy a better angle to get the guy. Sometimes you see that. Sometimes you see a guy wanting to do that, but then there's penetration backside, so you can't. So the guy on the outside looks like he lost his block, but the reality is it was going to be cut up and you couldn't do it because you had to take a wider angle. So there's a lot of things that with that, but I think the commitment to it and then the ability to convert on third downs has allowed them to grind out these games. And again, hit them with the occasional jet to Curtis Samuel or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I like the word you use there, grind, because it is a little bit of a grind. It's not this sleek running game like you see sometimes in Tennessee or you see in Cleveland or even you see in Atlanta at times. It's a grind. It's like it's muddy, it's messy, it's murky, but you got backs who can break tackles and you got big offensive linemen who can move a pile and get you to 3.5 yards a carry. And I think as they get more comfortable with their identity, which is relatively new. I mean, I think this kind of, you know, this shift toward this kind of gap scheme run with no puller has been relatively recent. So as they get more, you know, like think about like Tennessee or Atlanta, like they know who they are from training camp. This is a little bit of a newer development, and I think as they get more familiar, maybe they get cleaner because they have gotten cleaner as the weeks have gotten on. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. And the other thing about the duo play is it's helped their play action game tremendously. Because the motion and the movement again forces those linebackers to step up in a more aggressive way, which has helped cultivate some throwing lanes too.
And that's how they got Terry on that dig. I mean, the linebackers are flying up and there's nobody and they're sprinting back. It's like, it's too late, man. Sorry. It's too late. You know, but I also like, you know, you watch Robinson had a 3-yard run the other day. It was a beautiful run because he should have been stopped for 2 yards for a loss. And Gibson had a couple runs where, you know, you create, I put one on Instagram where it's like, it was well blocked. And there was a combination of well blocked and then, you know, tight ends, all of them. And then Gibson with some good vision, some good cuts, and then finishing with power and 2 hands on the ball. So I think like,
was it the run at the end of the game? The last one? Like, that was an excellent run.
It was everything. It was well executed on multiple levels. And and Gibson finished very well. So that was something that see defensively, what has surprised you most maybe over the last 5-6 weeks?
Probably the development of the secondary, you know, how that group has just been so cohesive. You know, Benjamin St. Juste, I think we knew he was a good player. I think, you know, you and I have talked about how much we like him. But to see him playing like with this level of like, you know, guarding Justin Jefferson, guarding AJ Brown, like guarding the team's number one. Brandon Cooks is no slouch in his own right at receiver, right? So I think that's been really cool to see, and just how that addition, Forrest coming into the lineup, moving Bobby McCain to nickel. Like I kind of forgot that he could do that, but he's done an excellent job of, you know, being physical in the run game, making tackles. And to me, that's been, you kind of knew the pieces were there, but to see it come together like this so dramatically and so definitively over the last 3 or 4 weeks has been pretty cool.
Why is Deron Payne and Allen have been phenomenal. It feels like Deron has kind of elevated his game this year. Now we know the contract's coming up. Have you seen a difference in his game, or is it just opportunities? What do you? I mean, again, he was a good player before, but he seemed to be playing at a higher level.
Yeah, I mean, I think the opportunity is a huge factor, right? And like when you don't have a guy who's taking away from your third down pass rush reps and Matt Ioannidis, I think that's a gigantic deal. I think the addition of a guy like John Ridgeway that in the Cinco package takes you out of being the nose. Like the nose and the single front is the worst position in that whole thing. So you want to be playing 3 technique. And so he had to play nose last year. And Ioannidis was a 3 technique. Now he's in a position in that front where he gets to make more plays. And so obviously being in on pass rushing downs, I think allows him to show his athleticism and his dexterity as a rusher. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely elevated his game, but I do think it coincides with just being on the field more and the staff putting him in more advantageous situations because you don't have a guy like Ioannidis here taking reps away from you.
And I think with Ridgeway, that's what they were hoping Mathis would do for Payne as well. Because when they drafted him, it's like, well, and let me be clear. If Tim Settle's here, he ain't playing that role. Deron Payne is. So that's why they went out and got Mathis, and it's why they liked Ridgeway and claimed him. And Ridgeway maybe shouldn't throw guys down the way he did. But you know what? Like I love his attitude and his on the field. Like he understands who he is. He's
he's a big bully of a man, and that's what you need playing nose guard in the NFL. You need a guy who's going to eat double teams, throw other big men around, And he's done that. And so kudos to him and kudos to the staff for finding him. But again, that ability to put him in there and, think about when against Detroit, for example, they had Duran playing nose, Allen playing 3 technique, and F.A.
Right.
Obata playing 3 technique. Now that looks totally different. So I do think that, again, the addition of one person sometimes, even if they're not the best nose guard of all time, can elevate the other guys, which elevates that package. And again, Payne deserves a ton of credit. I think is also being a little bit more adventurous in his approach. Like what I mean by that is he's willing to make plays, willing to take chances that he wasn't necessarily willing to do last year. And it makes sense as to why, because he wasn't playing that much, right? So now he's in the flow of the game and he feels comfortable doing some of that stuff, which is great.
And I'm glad you brought up McCain. I kind of think he's been an unsung hero. And he had a couple plays the other day. Every game he's got these where he's very quick to recognize things up there. He's quick, but he plays bigger than he is. And he had one play the other day where Pierce gets dropped for like a 1-yard gain, but he comes up hard and takes on the lead
nails
blocker.
The fullback. Nails him.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's like it was early in the game, but like he's a smaller guy, but like I find him to be an unsung hero in the secondary.
Yeah, and I think like that play to me is an excellent example of kind of the pieces that have grown up over the last couple of weeks. And so he absolutely chins that fullback, who is a physical fullback, which is a tough thing to do. John Ridgway beats the center across his face, taking on 2 players, and Jamin Davis is hitting on the tackle, right? So there you see kind of all these pieces. It's not Allen Payne on this down. It's those guys who are elevating themselves and making those plays. And obviously you cannot give Allen and Payne enough credit. Like they deserve every bit of press they're getting. Like I mean, you've been around the game much longer than me, John, but I cannot think of a duo that has been playing better football than them. 2 guys on the same team at the same time, playing inside, that are just dominant. They're against the run and against the pass.
And they're working very well. That group, it works so well together, which when I want to bring up this one is Chase Young coming back.
Yes.
Because one of the strengths of this group has been, they're very talented, and they were talented last year. And you'd see games where I'm like, oh, this guy had a good play, but I don't think the group had a good game. You saw like guys have good games, but not as a group. They're doing that as a group. So for Young to come back, and not that everything, like it's not like he was the world's most unselfish player last year. I'm not saying that, but the group was not playing as well. Now they are. So when he comes back in, what does he have to do? What's the challenge for him to kind of integrate into that whole structure?
Yeah, that's a really good question, John. And I think it's something that I've been kicking around a lot, because as much as you want to say he's significantly better than James, he's significantly better than Casey, he's significantly better than FA. Those 3 guys, FA a little bit of an outlier here, do what they're supposed to do in the defense. They play off of John Allen, John Allen, Payne, and Sweat. They know how they fit in the rush, and they're okay with that. They're a role player. You're 6th man off the bench. They understand they can score you some points, get some pressures, get some sacks, but they understand how they fit in. And I think one thing about getting a guy like Chase back is all the chemistry that this group has cultivated, which you see it on their rushes. You see them kind of filling in for each other. You see Allen getting high in his rush, and you see Casey ducking back inside, or you see Payne picking for Sweat and he ends up getting a pressure. That stuff is stuff that comes with time and reps. And so when you put that piece back in, I think there's going to be some growing pains, quite frankly, because, like they have worked on that a lot, and that you can tell, and it's paid dividends. And he hasn't been around for off season or training camp. So I don't think it's going to be this, revolutionary thing for the defense. I think obviously you want good players on the field and you want him to build the chemistry with those guys. But I do think it's going to take some time to kind of work through some of that stuff.
And I think it would take time regardless, because he hasn't played. I mean, the one thing I think that helps him is that he knows he hasn't played. So just do your job, and don't, like I thought last year he was trying, I think they were all trying to do something. But this year it's like and the one thing with Chase, like that guy he's always in the locker room. He's always with these guys. He's the first one on the field to congratulate guys. You see him doing like he's as excited after the Eagles game. He was a guy as excited as anybody. So it's not like he's some off by himself, like just all about. So that's not about that. And you put the talent with that, but regardless, the time missed is difficult to do when you're coming into the season when they've already established something. So it just, but if he does it, he's going to really benefit, and so will they. When he gets to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And again, like it's just about them getting reps together, working on that opportunity. You know, I had a conversation with a defensive line coach, one of my buddies from a different team, and he was basically saying like to get that level of chemistry, it just takes reps. Like
Yeah,
we try to coach it, we try to remind it, but Chase hasn't been here for that.
right. It's hard.
So it's going to be tough. And so it'll be interesting to see like how quickly he develops that relationship with those other rushers and understands how he fits within the context of the defense. Because while he is a special talent,
It
he's a
is.
generational talent. He's a very good football player. Like it's a team game for a
Yeah.
reason, and it's going to take some time to figure that out, I think.
It will, and it's like it's okay if it does because he's missed a lot of time. They're going to use him situationally whenever he comes back, which is smart. So you put him in situations where you can get the most out of what he can do right
Right.
now, and that's smart. And so I think he can still be productive. I'm curious to see where this goes because once it clicks from it may not be till next year. We don't know, but I think it'll be. So last thing then, what do you see for this team going forward? Do you like what could happen over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks?
Yeah, of course I like what can happen. And I think, you look around the league and the trend of like running the football to insulate kind of average quarterback play with teams with good defenses is prevalent. It's very common. But you also see that it's the reason teams don't do this or employ this philosophy more often is because it's very hard to be consistently successful with it. Like we mentioned Atlanta, but also the Giants. Like they lost to Detroit, right? Detroit was able to put up some points, and the defense wasn't able to hold the bag, and the offense couldn't keep pace.
Right.
So that's something that you run the risk of. And if you look at the remaining schedule, right? Obviously, Atlanta's not going to put up a million points, but they can score. Dallas can score some points. I think Washington's defense matches up really well. I think the Giants game is going to be an absolute slugfest because they're very similar in terms of philosophy. Then you get San Francisco and Cleveland. And Cleveland's defense is not good, but their offense is pretty solid. And San Francisco's offense, we saw what they can do last night, when they're really coached up and ready to go. So it's going to be a challenge to kind of maintain this offensive identity. But I think with how well the defense is playing, with the efficiency, if the efficiency continues to improve in the run game, if Taylor cannot kind of regress into this low level of play variance, which he's done in his past, I think the opportunities are there, but they're going to be close games.
Yeah.
They're going to be close kind of
NFL.
last possession types games. Yes. This is not the Kansas City Chiefs who can walk in and blow people out, scoring 35 points every week. It's going to be a very different type of winning, but are they capable of doing some things in the last, quarter of the season here? I think absolutely.
You see these wild games every week because I think the parity is there. Logan, tell people where they can get you. First of all, I'm going to recommend people to watch your segments on Instagram, but I want you to tell them where they can get it because the stuff with Ron Rivera is really, really good because you both are very good at describing game action. Your stuff with Fred Smoot, always terrific. Where can they find you on?
Yeah, so obviously my Instagram is Logan_Paulsen82. I've tried to post some stuff there, and then obviously the command center stuff with Julie, which is on YouTube. That's been a lot of fun to do, and that's where a lot of my content is through the team. So definitely check that out on the YouTube page.
Thanks, Logan. You're the best.
Thanks, John.